like this, man. He's like a butterfly flapping his wings deep down in the forest, man. It's gonna cause a tree fall like 5,000 miles away, man. There ain't nobody seeing nobody. Man, see, like, you don't even know, man. It's like you're born into this world, man. And you got like that, man. The dust and wind, man. Or like the dang old candle, man. It don't matter, man. It's all time.
All right, Larry Johnson, welcome back to the Jay Burton Show. How you doing, man?
I thank you for the invitation. Happy to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you back on. I enjoyed our last conversation a lot. I mean, look, there's a lot of guys having theoretical conversations, but you have real world experience. And when we're talking about things like what we're going to talk about tonight, I think that is that's helpful, right? You get a lot of kind of armchair quarterback, so to speak.
Yeah, I got the gray hair the old fashioned way. I earned it.
Well, fair enough. So what I'll do is kind of set out a general roadmap for what I want to discuss, and we can go from there. So, as I said before we went live, there have been, during my entire life, effectively no, credible assassinations attempts on a president. And then we had two in very short succession. What's especially weird is that they have completely disappeared. Right, you'll see that iconic image of Trump with his fist in the air, but other than his hardcore fan base, it's just not talked about anymore. And so, I'm curious, why do you think those two events have just vanished so quickly?
Well, the political class, which includes the corporate media, wanted to disappear because their entire approach is, and what made the assassination attempts possible, is that they were wanting to destroy Donald Trump, not just metaphorically, but physically, literally, kill him. And these two failures disappointed them. So why they recognize that if they focus on it, it just adds to Trump's status as an iconic kind of not just a politician, but as a leader. It portrays him as somewhat invincible and more relatable. So yeah, they want to shut it down, and because he is such a threat to the status quo.
Yeah, I think that you're right. I mean, it's obvious that almost irrationally they hate Donald Trump. I mean, just look at the lawfare, right? The lawfare, which has been incredibly petty, vindictive, and nonsensical, right? He got felony charges for a bookkeeping error. Right. Okay, sure, it's technically against the law, but has anyone else been prosecuted? Right. Let alone a guy running for president who happens to be extraordinarily unpopular in the exact place where he was prosecuted. Right. It stretches credibility.
Yeah. I mean, and along those lines, the fact that nobody actually lost money, the bank, if you're going to defraud, and there's a difference between money laundering and fraud. Fraud means somebody is taking something from you and you're losing something. Money laundering is money that comes from a criminal activity that is basically lubricating your system. You're getting money. That's why banks are notorious for being involved with money laundering schemes, because they make a lot of money off of it.
So I want to go back into the details of these two assassinations, not because, I'm some kind of conspiracy theorist or I'm interested in mapping out all the details, but because you've seen a variety of different narratives. So could you give us sort of the MSNBC stamp of approval version of what happened in PA, the most kind of normal, quote unquote, version of that story?
Well, I'm not sure there is one. So let's deal with, the MSNBC version was questioning whether even Trump got shot. Okay. So something happened at a rally and Trump was bleeding from an ear, but they got away with it and somebody got shot. That would be the mainstream media version. The what really happened version is a complete breakdown in Secret Service protection. They failed to do their job. And the job of a Secret Service agent in charge is to first go out in advance, send advance teams out to a site to assess the physical avenues of approach, to determine where the most likely threats exist, and to determine what kind of assets, resources are needed to protect that site. That only happened in part because when they one, didn't go out soon enough. Two, they didn't bring in a counter sniper team to be part of that assessment, which they should have. Three, the person doing the assessment had no experience doing assessments. So, it's like, you're being asked to work on a Formula One racer and you've never worked on a Formula One racer before. So they just give you a sledgehammer and a screwdriver and say, good luck. So the part of that, advance work that should have been done was to have identified those buildings that were to Trump's right, where the shooter was ultimately found, located, and shot. That those should have been secured and locked down by the police and the Secret Service. Because the Secret Service doesn't have enough personnel to go out and do it all on their own. So that's why they have to rely upon both state police, county police, and local sheriff's departments or local police departments from cities and small towns. But at minimum, they should have set a perimeter around that building so that they could monitor and ensure that nobody gained access to the roof, and or have posted one or two people on the roof facing outward so that they would be able to protect that line of approach. Well, that wasn't done. They didn't have the right kind of communication system in place because the threat was identified in advance and they were calling it in, but instead of coming into a central command where everybody then could immediately give orders to all the different security elements involved, they failed to do that. Trump was just lucky. Those who believe in divine providence, he dodged a bullet. It was a little bit like Keanu Reeves in Matrix, man. But he didn't realize he's been shot at until he heard the snap, crackle, pop of that bullet speeding past his head.
So I'm going to give you two theories, right? One coming from the left, one coming from the right on that specific event. And I want to get your reactions to it. So first, right, you have, let's just call it the blue anon take, right? The kind of crazy fringe of the left that says, obviously it's a setup. He did the old WWE trick where you hide a razor blade in your palm and slice your ear. There's no way that they could have, left such an obvious hole. Clearly, this is the FBI for some reason deciding to help Trump. Again, you can tell I don't really follow this. Whereas on the other side, right, you have the kind of right-wing fringe, which basically says, this shooter was, the CIA, pick your poison. And that's why he was allowed up there. It was a hit on Trump. And so I'm curious, what is your take on both of those kind of narratives?
They've never, obviously, people that push those narratives have never worked in government and in these large bureaucracies. Never mistake stupidity for malice. In other words, I love that there's a great line in the movie The Big Short where the guys who are shorting the housing market are asking the guy that sold it to him, how could people be so stupid? This is criminal. And he said, look, if stupidity was a criminal act, I'd have my brother-in-law arrested. And so let's go to the first take, which is that this was a staged event. You don't stage the hypersonic sound of the bullet crack, which we heard, and which one photographer managed to capture, oddly enough. You don't stage that. And the immediate reaction of the Secret Service in surrounding him reflected the fact that their shots were fired, and they did find the gun and the shooter on top of the roof. So, the the first theory is just so completely off base, it's ridiculous. The second theory was, I wouldn't say necessarily CIA at all. CIA gets way too much credit for doing things that it's not very good at. But I think some attention needs to be paid to the fact that this attempt came 2 days before the start of the Republican convention. This individual was basically allowed to gain access because the security measures that should have been in place were not in place. Now, was that just because the Secret Service leadership is totally incompetent? That's a possibility. Or was it deliberate incompetence, allowing that kind of incompetence to be on display so that this kid could get a shot, could get access? Clearly, he had some training, not a lot, but enough to know how, apparently had zeroed that rifle out to 100, 200 yards. The shooting an M16, an AR platform like he was carrying, it's still, you can make, if trained, you can make accurate shots, but when you start firing rapidly, as he ended up doing, the likelihood that you're going to hit anything with any accuracy goes way down. So he was not some highly trained person, but he was put up to it, I believe. I don't think he did this all on his own. I think there was some encouragement, there was some contacts with people that made it possible, and the Republicans were certainly, the Republican establishment, the Rhino establishment, were certainly unpleased, saddened to hear that it didn't come off with Trump dying.
Well, I mean, so two things there. One, speaking to the lack of training, this is actually something that Eric Prince brought up, right? That it seems as if he was aiming for Trump's head, right? Which is not, if you're trained, what you're supposed to do. If you're dealing with an elderly man who is not wearing armor, right? It doesn't really matter much where you hit him in the chest. It's not going to be a good day. So that's one part of it. I think Prince also as well, has a background in executive protection, obviously with Blackwater. So an interesting data point, right? Take it for what you will. But to me, the thing that sticks out to me is the fact that there seems to be no motive, right? Obviously, we can speculate on it. People want to shoot the president for any number of reasons, but that seemed incredibly suspicious to me. Now, contrast that, right, to the second, much less successful presidential assassin, right? Ryan Ruth, I believe was his name, who seems to be an absolute Ukraine fanatic, right? He was human trafficking people to fight the Russians. Obviously, that's a much clearer line. You can see why someone who had kind of drunk the Kool-Aid on the grand Russian hoax would want to get rid of President Trump. And so, I hate to say it, it makes sense, right? I'm not saying I approve of it, but you can follow the logic there. But I mean, the fact that there has been very little information on the first shooter at all just struck me as very, very suspicious. And to your last point about the fact that it seemed like there were a lot of people who were really wanting, not to be too blunt about it, but Donald Trump to be shot live on television. You saw that in the reaction, right? Obviously, of course, the kind of like lunatic left went nuts. They were saying, I wish he would have hit him. Teachers, government officials were saying this. And thankfully, it seems like many of them lost their jobs for it. But I mean, the relatively tepid response by Trump's alleged allies, that tells its own story.
Well, I put the first one in the category as a natural consequence of the Democrats' accusations and rhetoric over the last 5 years. Trump is Hitler. Trump is an existential threat to this country. Trump is a fascist. Trump is a Nazi. Trump is a vile racist. He has to be stopped at any cost. And then, when you attach that to the various videos that have been put online of, Kathy Griffin, the so-called comedian, saying, cutting a head off of a Donald Trump dummy. You have the actor's name is escaping me at the moment, but Johnny Depp. He's talking about hey, the assassination, John Wilkes Booth. He was openly commenting on assassinating Trump. I forget which rapper did a video where they shot again a Trump made up. So the killing Trump was sort of an establishment meme that had been normalized. So that's why I don't think it's necessarily surprising that this, kid could have been prevailed upon to participate in this act and to take a leading role without necessarily thinking through the consequences of what he was doing and what he was getting into.
Well, I think as well, right? One of the through lines we see in a lot of these spree killers, right, is a desire to kind of go down in infamy, right, to make your name. And when you've been given the moral license to do something like that, right, you are being taught over and over and over again, well, what do you do to Nazis, right? You punch Nazis, you do the kind of things you see in film and video games, anywhere, any form of media. That's what good people do. And then the next part of that, right, is Donald Trump is a Nazi, fascist, whatever. And the conclusion is never said, but heavily implied, right? And there's a podcaster, right, who's kind of gone insane in the era of Trump, but was, quite rational for a while, Dan Carlin. And he had this talking point about a pressure cooker, right? Basically saying that this heightened political environment, it's like a pressure cooker. You just increase the pressure little bit by little bit. And, for me or you, we might be able to take quite a lot before we go nuts, right? We could take a lot of pressure. But for those people on the fringes, right, who might be a little bit off in a normal society, maybe he's just the kind of guy that has model trains, but you turn that pressure cooker up and they go nuts. And again, I'm not saying that, but to me, my take on this whole assassination attempt is, to me, it seems like this guy isn't some sort of, trained assassin or wasn't in on the job, but was basically a dumb kid, who wanted to be infamous. And there were some reports that he was planning a mass shooting and Trump happened to be there, which, take what you will from that. But to me, I don't necessarily see a grand conspiracy in this. Now, that doesn't change what happened, right? Trump nearly died, very, very close to being killed. But to me, the idea that this was, faked or that he's some sort of CIA hitman is a bit, it's a bit outrageous.
I mean, he legitimately tried to kill Trump.
Yes.
The extent of assistance that he had at this point is still unknown. I would just my own opinion based upon looking at, the entire setup is I think he did have some outside help. Who that was, I don't know. But I don't think he was just the lone wolf who woke up. Well, because, this was planned out in advance. And he also had to calculate that there was going to be some incompetence on display by the Secret Service, which there absolutely was. He should have been apprehended and prevented from getting there.
What do you make of the connection some people are trying to draw between Iran and an assassination attempt on Trump?
Yeah, it's horseshit.
Pretty much my take as well.
Yeah, no. Look, this is another deep state effort to try to create a casus belli where we can go attack Iran. We're desperate to attack Iran. We keep, the lie keeps being spread that Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world. Well, no, it's not. I can prove it to you. Go to the State Department Bureau of Counterterrorism. Every year they publish an annual report, country reports on terrorism. In there, they list the top 10 groups around the world that are carrying out the most terrorist activities, that are killing the most people, causing the most mayhem. 10 of them, top 10, Not a single one is sponsored by Iran, has a relationship with Iran, is trained by Iran, receives funding from Iran. None. Zero. So explain to me how Iran's the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world when none of the top 10 groups have any sponsorship or relationship with Iran. That's not how this works. So, it's all propaganda. The reality is, if we're going to count state terrorism based upon people killed and wounded as a result of violent attacks, that sort of the number one and number two countries in that regard would be the United States and Israel. And people say, why do you hate America? I don't hate America. But, we need to stop bullshitting ourselves that we're, we think we're Liam Neeson, in that movie Taken, where his daughter goes to Paris and gets nabbed by these nasty Serbian criminals, and then he has to go rescue her because she was doing nothing wrong but just making a bad choice. That's how we always present ourselves. We're there minding our own business when that Manuel Noriega, by God, we had to invade him. And yeah, we were just enjoying Sunday picnics when those Vietnamese came at us and we had to go there. And let's not forget about Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis. We had to go there twice. And those Afghanis, man, they attacked us on 9/11. Well, actually, they didn't. It was Saudis, but that's a whole nother story. So we keep generating these narratives that are false. And one of those narratives that we've convinced ourselves of is Iran is a great terrorist threat, and the only way we can stop it is by starting a new war.
To me, and one of I think the best ways to look at what are the priorities of the deep state, right? However broadly you want to define that, because they say all kinds of things, right? And to be honest, you can't really trust a lot of what they say. But to me, you can almost see sort of a negative of what they care about in how they treat other people. So for instance, right, what does Trump get credit for, right? When was Trump, quote unquote, presidential? Well, it's when he ordered the assassination of Soleimani, right? Now, on the other hand, what happens when he decides we have to pull out of Syria? His generals just lie to him. They say they're going to do it and they don't. When you look at the social stuff, and look, you and I assume both have, shall we say, non-standard opinions on any number of social issues, right? When it comes to pick your poison. And, there's a large hullabaloo about that. They'll, scream and cry. But at the same time, when it comes down to brass tacks, what's the priority? And to me, it seems that the priority is foreign wars, right? That is the ultimate priority of the deep state.
Let me show you. Let me show you why. Can you see that?
Yes. I can't read the ticker, though. Oh, Northrop Grumman.
Yeah, Northrop Grumman. Look at that. That's the 10-year ticker. It's up $406 in 10 years. It's now at $531.43. Think about that. It was $125 10 years ago. Now it's at $531. That's why we have wars right there. It makes money. It's profitable. Hey, we don't get a lot of people killed, at least on our side. My God, we may kill tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of foreigners, but who gives a shit? They're brown people. They're some other color. They're not part of us. So, screw them. They can die. But man, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and there's another company on here that just a drone maker called AV. Man, they're up to over $200 now a share, and they were like $15, I think, 3 years ago. So why do we do this? Follow the money, baby. Follow the money.
And I'm sure you're aware where all of the wealthiest counties in America are. Right, they just so happen to be in Northern Virginia, where the headquarters for
Montgomery. I lived in Montgomery County, Maryland, for 40 years.
Oh, deeply sorry about that.
Yeah, so Montgomery County, Maryland, Arlington, Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia. Now they've gone out. Virginia's expanding a little farther out. People generally prefer Virginia over Maryland. But yeah, no, they become, when I first moved there in 1979, there were no Ferrari dealerships. There were, the luxury automobile. The concept of a luxury automobile back then was maybe a Mercedes-Benz. That was it. Lamborghinis, are you kidding me? Rolls Royce, they got all that now. Where'd that money come from? Taxpayers. And it goes to fund wars. Because war and politics, great business. Way to get wealthy.
Well, this actually ties in very neatly, right, to our second attempted assassin. So this is a weird story, right? There's just a lot of things that don't add up. So officially, right, Trump is playing on one of his own golf courses in Florida. Secret Service is out ahead of him. They see a rifle barrel poking out of the bushes. They shoot at him. The guy speeds off, is eventually apprehended. Trump was in danger, right? But he's not being shot at in the moment. And we start to learn more and more about this bizarre character, right? So he's released this manifesto, saying if he doesn't do it, someone else needs to. It seems to be entirely motivated by the Russia-Ukraine war. This is just an amusing anecdote, but he seems to have the most absolutely cobbled together rifle imaginable, a poorly converted SKS with a Walmart scope, electric tape to the top. So not exactly a serious operator, right? But nonetheless, right, that's very interesting, right? That the sort of main, well, I guess it's now secondary after October 7th, imperial project of, USG, which is Ukraine, that is the named reason for this assassination attempt. So what do you make of this whole situation, Larry?
Yeah, something stinks with this guy. Again, this is another one, clearly not a lone wolf, because this guy reportedly was, we can't get a straight story. Either he owned a business, he was unemployed, but he had a nice vehicle, and he drove from North Carolina down to Florida, which is, that's about an 8-hour drive, 8-9 hours, depending on where you start in North Carolina. And then, he apparently knew that Trump was going to be there. He had intel. He wasn't just guessing and showing up. Because, do you know where Donald Trump's going to be this Sunday? I don't. And
I have no idea.
Yeah, so, but yeah, he was able to determine actually in advance, because, think about it. He doesn't just, it's like if it's a Saturday and you learn, oh, hey, Donald Trump's going to be playing golf tomorrow. You got to hop in the car and still, like I said, a 9-hour drive, driving overnight, no sleep. And then, showing up at the golf course, plus, whether he realized it or not, he was just around the corner from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office, where he was actually physically located in that fence. So the Palm Beach Sheriff's Office was there. So, where did the financial support come from? And where did the intelligence come from? And, he clearly had contacts with people in Ukrainian intelligence and with some people in the United States that are extremely supportive of the Ukrainian cause, including that knucklehead Malcolm Nance, who's, that guy's great for embellishing his biography, being a big special operations guy, so he claims.
Oh yeah, this for any of the listeners at home, after the episode is done, look this guy up. He is genuinely hilarious. He loves to post all of these, tough guy photos, which, if you know anything about guns or gear, are always just laughable, right? He'll be, holding a gun wrong. The magazine won't be seated, and he'll be talking about, fighting Russians in the trees, and you'll see, like, wait a minute, isn't that an office chair in the background? And it's like, Malcolm is like, oh, no, of course. It was just a photo op. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. He was a SIGINT guy with the Navy. Okay. So he was good at intercepting people's phone calls, but as far as being a special operations warrior, oh my God, he's a joke. And and look, I worked with the Special Operations Forces, held top secret compartmented clearances with JSOC and SOCOM. So I did that for 23 years. So, I know the community. I know the real people from the frauds and the fakes. And Nance in my book is one of the ultimate frauds.
So what's especially weird about this guy, Ruth, I'll go with that for his name, is that he seems to have a previous conviction for a WMD, which admittedly is a legal term. We're not talking about the same thing that Saddam was alleged to have had. Seems to be a converted machine gun. So obviously he was a prohibited felon. But the fact that guy was not on anyone's radar, right? Someone with a previous history of violence is able to camp out, according to the FBI, for 12 hours. He's alleged to have gone there at about 1 a.m, stayed there the whole time, sitting with a rifle, not particularly far into the bushes. It's just a bizarre situation. And I don't have some kind of grand explanation. It's just, this is a really weird story, and it has almost completely disappeared from the front page.
Yeah, there should be really digging into his background, his contacts, his, his overseas relationships. Because again, he was traveling back. On the one hand, we're told the guy's unemployed, but he's traveling back and forth to Ukraine, which is not a cheap. It's not like you're flying to Vegas for a weekend of gambling and they can give you a $150 plane ticket. He's going to get into some money apart from having to, get a hotel. So it smells. There's something odd about it. Of course, in this is an example where the Secret Service did its job. Now, I was actually on a golf course up in Maryland. I was a member of a TPC course called Avenel. And when Joe Biden, when was this? This was 2014. Biden showed up on a Sunday with Hunter, and they were going to play the back nine. My partner and I, my golfing buddy, we'd finished that day, so we were out watching, and we saw how the Secret Service handles a president on a private golf course. So you got an immediate detail around him on the tee box. Then there's another couple of guys in a golf cart that are about halfway down the fairway, roughly where his ball is going to land. Then you've got another team, 2 to 4 guys ahead at the next green, which is also near the next tee box. So it was that team that spotted this guy with a rifle poking out of the screen. And they didn't wait. They did what they're supposed to do. They started firing. They didn't stop to say, "Oh, hey, sir, is that a gun? Is that," that's not how they're trained. If you see a gun, draw and start shooting. Shoot first, ask questions later. And I guess our friend Mr. Root, he beat feet, ran to his car, left a lot of his belongings behind, and tried to escape. It's unfortunate that they pulled him over. They should have, would have made some sense to have allowed him to go to his final destination. Just follow him to see was he working with anybody else? Did he have some other support?
So I want to take a step back just to read out. I found the exact description from the BBC. In 2002, he was charged for the possession of a fully automatic machine gun, somewhat redundant, which was referred to in court filings as a weapon of mass destruction. But this is the weird part, right? This occurred in the context of a 3-hour armed standoff with police officers in Greensboro, which is, again, the fact that this man is out on the street after that.
Why is he walking around?
Exactly. Yet alone flying back and forth to Ukraine, right? We have his social media footprint, which indicates that in addition to caring about Ukraine, he's also very pro-Taiwan, which, makes sense, right? Those are both, items of interest for the U.S. intelligence agency. But I really have no definitive answer to this other than this stinks to high heaven. It seems incredibly suspicious to me.
Yeah, well, you are asking rational questions, and it is. I said there's some very unusual things about his background that, if nothing else, should have flagged him. But I can't. I cannot rule out the possibility of financing and encouragement from Ukraine in trying to carry out this attempt on Donald Trump.
Well, and I hate to say it, but this is not the first time there has been a suspicious assassination with Ukrainian fingerprints on it. When you and I spoke at the last time, we talked about the massacre in Russia, right? Which may or may not have been funded by Ukrainian intelligence. Vladimir Putin's daughter was it his Putin's daughter or was it Dugin's? Excuse me, my mistake.
Alexander Dugin, Darina Dugina.
So point is, very suspicious bad things tend to happen to people who the Ukrainian intelligence services don't like. Again, I can't prove it, but drawing a trend line, you see a strong indication.
Well, and they've got a death list pulled up already, and there are several Americans on it, including Scott Ritter. I was sort of disappointed. I'm a nobody. I didn't make the list.
Sort of. I feel like that's like a great speeding ticket or something. You have to print it off and hang it up in your office. I'm wanted dead or alive by Ukrainian intelligence. But I want to take this to a different level, right? You mentioned earlier this kind of war racket, and what's interesting about this latest assassin, right, is that he's certainly aligned to a certain degree, right, with the left in America. But also every time you see him, he's draped in the American flag, talking about threats to our democracy. And one of the things that I remember growing up in kind of the mid 2000s is that if you had any criticism of these kind of foreign adventures, that was taken as a criticism of America, right?
Now, why do you hate America?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so let's have me play devil's advocate here and ask you that question, Mr. Johnson. Why do you hate America?
Yeah, I hate what America does. I hate the fact that America is the world's bully. I hate the fact that America is now spending almost $1 trillion on a defense budget while we have high levels of poverty and inequality in this country. I hate the fact that we killing a lot of foreigners who, frankly, are not very forgiving, and they'll remember that we killed them, and they'll seek revenge. So, if you step back and look at all countries in the world, there's only one country that has more than 50 military bases around the world. Only one country that has more than 100. Only one that has more than 200. Only one that has more than 300. 400. We're at 750 military bases around the world. That's us, the United States. Russia reportedly has 21 outside of its territory, with 19 of those 21 being in countries that are immediately adjacent to it. Just like if we had a base in Mexico and one in Canada, which oddly we don't. But in China, to my knowledge, doesn't have any. And yet, the country that keeps hollering the most about imperialism and people wanting to conquer the world, we keep blaming the Russians and the Chinese for that when we're the ones who do it. And we got the war record, the blood of Afghans, Iraqis, Serbians, Iraqis again, Syrians, Libyans, Yemenis, Somalians, Vietnamese, Cambodians. It's a long, long, bloody list. Guatemala, Panama, Dominican Republic. Yeah, not a very pleasant way to look at it. So I just, these are the facts. I'm not making this up. The United States just refuses to come to grips with its own reality.
Well, and you could almost imagine an alternate situation, right? You've heard it before that, these wars in the Middle East, they're wars for oil, right? I don't believe that. But if that were true, right, we had taken over the Middle East. Gas was 5 cents a gallon. We were bringing just a ton of direct resources back. Kind of an older school of imperialism, right? The British Empire, where we bring raw resources back here. It wouldn't be morally right, but you could at least understand it. But this is sort of a doubly perverse situation where the people who fight these wars, right, middle Americans, people like you and I, have been massively disadvantaged, right? Look at the declining both standards of living, declining life expectancy, the increase of deaths of despair. The people who fight these wars are in no way improved by them. Who is improved? You're certainly right. These military industrial contractors are. A certain Middle Eastern democracy certainly benefits quite a lot from it. But effectively, obviously the people directly involved are bearing the cost of it. It is quite simply a bad deal for the people of America. And so when someone says, "Oh, you hate America," it's like, well, I don't like America, as a national entity, right? The USG, whatever you want to call it. I don't like that. But they don't like me either. Why should I? Right? Why should I like the people who are, sending my friends to get their legs blown off for no apparent gain? Right? To me, you're letting, and I'll wrap this up, but you were taking your good natural instinct towards patriotism, which is a healthy instinct, and letting people who despise you use that to lead you around by the nose. Right? You're being taken advantage of. It's Charlie Brown in the football, right? Anyway, sorry, back to you, Larry.
Well, no, I was just going to point out, one of the poster boys for what you're describing is former Vice President Richard Cheney, Dick Cheney. Cheney turned 20 in 1961, so just as Vietnam's getting up and running. And did he go sign up to join the military and go out and help pursue his dreams? Oh, hell no. He got accustomed that by the time he was 31 in 1971, or 30 in 1971, his routine was 2 martini lunch and 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And I know that because a dear friend of mine is the one who hired him at a place called Bradley Woods where he sat hiding. But here's Cheney, who came from modest background, but became fabulously wealthy. Why? Well, helped promote a war in Iraq that really boosted the stock price of Halliburton, which he held in trust, but he made a boatload of money over that. And he left Washington wealthier than when he came in. So that's why I keep coming back to the money. That's what we're talking about. This is all about the money. It has nothing to do with patriotism. Nothing to do with right and wrong. This has to do with bottom line. Am I getting paid?
Well, and I think it's really important to think about this in a realist way, right? Because people love to talk about different ideologies, and while that certainly matters, right? People can be possessed by ideas. But a lot of times, right, if you set up a hierarchy where the most ruthless, the most power hungry rise to the top, those are the kind of actions you're going to get. And so, I see certain conservatives who get kind of wrapped around the axle about this. They'll say like, "Oh, well, why are the Democrats supporting Azov Battalion? Don't they know they're Nazis?" Because allegedly, right, Donald Trump is a Nazi, therefore the people who hate Donald Trump must hate Nazis. And it's like, well, sure, that's logically consistent, right? If we were dealing with logically consistent people, that would be the case. But we're clearly not, right? It is useful for them to support Azov. It lines their pockets. It accomplishes their goals. And so to me, it's like, if you're arguing, the logic of it, it's not that you're wrong to do so, but you're sort of missing the point. They don't care, right? They don't have to care.
Well, I mean, we've done the same thing in the field of terrorism. This is ostensibly after 9/11, this was a war on terror, and a war specifically directed against radical Sunni Islamic terrorists, extremists. Then we get into 2012 with the revolutions to start the Arab Spring, as it was called. And decide, get with the United Kingdom and working with Turkey, decided it would be a swell time to overthrow the government of Bashar al-Assad, who's an Alawite. So, but there's been, tensions in Syria over the years between Sunni and Shia Muslims. And some of them were very bloody. Bashar al-Assad's father was notorious for slaughter, killing, I think, 40,000 Muslims in one of these retributions. But Bashir was not his father and really protected religious independence in Syria. Nonetheless, we decided to start overthrowing him. And what did we do? We start arming the very Islamic terrorists that we claimed we had spent the previous 10 years fighting. Because now it's convenient. So that's what I mean, that hypocrisy that just leaches out. And it comes to, other people overseas see it, they recognize it, and we lose credibility.
Well, and I think that's an interesting thing about that, right? The idea of credibility. Because from a certain perspective, you could say, well, who cares, right? We're on top. We're the big kid on the playground. Why do we care what other people think about us? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, very few, and by very few, I mean absolutely none, of these empires have stayed on top forever, right? That is by definition an unstable role. But also, this is just kind of the mechanics of power politics. You can't fight everyone at once. You can't just declare war on any single country that minorly violates, your stated goals. And to me, one of the things that, and I was talking about this with our mutual friend, Stormy Waters, right? That obviously the U.S. has certain economic goals, right? They want everyone on the dollar. And we've proven to be less trustworthy than we said we would be. And so that doesn't mean that every country in the world is saying, screw you, America, I'm not buying your stuff. But it does mean that they start to eye the exit. They're like, hey, maybe it'd be better to have ties with Russia, ties with China, to form some kind of alternative arrangements. And you see people start to pull away because they know the U.S. cannot be trusted. I mean, look at what's happening to Ukraine now, right? We made all of these grand promises, we'll fight forever, we'll protect you.
We're with you to the end. We'll be with you to the end.
And
guess what? Hey, it's the end. See you later.
Exactly. And it'd be one thing if Ukraine was the first time this has happened, but it's not, right? I mean, you remember, I'm sure, what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Saigon, what happened in any number of these places. And so it's not our kind of core territories, right? Canada isn't going to join up with Russia. But if you're all the way across the world, if you're in Africa, if you're somewhere else, why wouldn't you start looking for someone who might be trustworthy, right? This kind of soft power really matters.
Yeah, no, we are untrustworthy. Well, we just saw a recent example of it vis-a-vis Iran and Hezbollah. We had apparently had back-channel communications with Hassan Nasrallah, the party chief of Secretary General, if you will, of Hezbollah, getting him to agree to a ceasefire on the promise that we were going to ensure there would be such a ceasefire. And it turned out there wasn't. That information was used as a means to target him and kill him. Well, that lesson has been learned now by the Iranians, by the Saudis, other nations in the region that one time may have trusted us, no longer do. I guarantee that. And that's bad for us.
So, Larry, we are fast approaching time. I've got to get out in the woods because it's urban archery season here, and I wouldn't want to waste daylight. But if people want to find more of your work, what's a good way for them to do that?
I'm at sonar21.com, sonar.21.com.
And I'll be sure to link that. Larry does good work. I'll also link a couple of your appearances on Judge Knapp because I think that they're well worth everyone's time. Again, thank you so much for making time to come out and talk to me.
My pleasure, Jay. Thank you.
As far as my stuff, The Jay Burden Show is available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to support us, Axios Remote Fitness and Coaching is our one and only channel sponsor. Highly recommend that. Not to turn this into a conversation about weightlifting, but I will say JD has me repping my old records, which is pretty good. again, like I said, guys, I appreciate everything. The podcast has been doing quite well. Reviews are flowing in. I appreciate that. But to everyone at home, keep your head up. The lie can't last forever. Good night.